It was one of those nights where everything seemed to go wrong. The kind of night that makes you question why you even got out of bed in the first place. At a small roadside diner tucked away on the outskirts of a sleepy Texas town, Emily was wrapping up what felt like the longest shift of her life. The neon sign outside flickered faintly, casting an uneven glow over the cracked asphalt parking lot. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, greasy fries, and stale dish soap, a scent that had somehow become oddly comforting after months of working there. Emily moved between tables with practiced efficiency, balancing plates of half-eaten burgers and empty soda glasses on her tray. Her uniform, once crisp white but now more gray than anything else, had seen better days. She'd patched up a tear near the hem of her skirt earlier that week, and the name tag pinned above her heart read, Emily, in faded letters. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, or at least it was supposed to. Tonight, though, things weren't going as planned. The dinner rush had been unusually slow, and most of the customers who did show up were either too frugal or too distracted to leave decent tips. A family of 4 left behind exactly $2 for an hour's worth of service, while a trucker who ordered 3 slices of pie somehow forgot to tip altogether. By the time the clock struck 9, Emily's jar was embarrassingly light, filled, mostly with coins and a couple of crumpled dollar bills. As she wiped down a sticky table in the corner, her frustration bubbled over. Sure, she knew not everyone could afford to tip generously, but tonight felt different. There was something about the way people acted, like they didn't care whether she was having a good day or not, that made her blood boil. Maybe it was the exhaustion talking, or maybe it was just the culmination of weeks of pent-up stress. Either way, she needed to vent. At the far end of the counter sat a lone man nursing a cup of black coffee. He looked like any other traveler passing through. Worn jeans, a plaid shirt rolled up at the sleeves, and boots scuffed from miles of walking. His face was weathered, with lines etched around his eyes that suggested years of hard-earned wisdom. But he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made him stand out, even if Emily didn't notice it right away. She approached him hesitantly, clearing her throat before speaking. "Refill?" she asked, gesturing toward his nearly empty mug. He glanced up, giving her a polite nod. "Sure, thanks." As she poured the steaming liquid into his cup, she hesitated. Something about his calm demeanor made her want to talk, to unload some of the weight she'd been carrying all night. After a moment of internal debate, she blurted out, "You ever notice how nobody tips anymore?" The man raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Not really," he admitted. "I don't come here often enough to keep track." "Well, let me tell you," Emily continued, leaning slightly against the counter. "It's gotten bad, like really bad. People order 5-course meals, sit around chatting for hours, then leave me 50 cents like I'm supposed to be grateful or something." She shook her head, her voice tinged with both anger and resignation. "And it's not just the money, it's the attitude. They act like we're invisible, like we don't matter unless we're bringing them food." The man listened intently, sipping his coffee without interrupting. When she paused to catch her breath, he asked, "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 2 years," she replied, straightening up. "Used to be okay, tips were decent, people were nice, but since the new owner took over..." She trailed off, shaking her head again. "Things changed. Feels like they only care about cutting. Costs not keeping us happy. Half the staff quit last month because of it." The man nodded thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. "That's tough," he said simply. "Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate." "You could say that," Emily muttered under her breath. She forced a smile, realizing she might have overshared with a complete stranger. "Sorry, I shouldn't dump all this on you, just rough night, you know?" "No need to apologize," he assured her, his tone warm and genuine. "Sometimes it helps to get it off your chest." With that, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a few bills and placing them on the counter. Then, to Emily's surprise, he added a $20 bill on top of his modest tab. "For the trouble," he said with a wink. Emily blinked, taken aback by the unexpected generosity. "Wow, thanks," she stammered, tucking the cash into her apron. "That's really nice of you." He stood up, grabbing his jacket from the stool beside him. "Take care of yourself," he said with a final nod before heading toward the door. As the bell above the entrance jingled softly, signaling his departure, Emily stared after him, still processing the encounter. Something about the man lingered, in her mind, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Little did she know, her chance meeting with the quiet stranger would soon change everything, for her, for the diner, and for everyone who worked there. The diner was quiet now, the late-night crowd having thinned out to just a few stragglers nursing their drinks or finishing up last bites of pie. Emily stood behind the counter, absently wiping down the already clean surface with a damp rag. Her mind kept drifting back to the stranger who had sat there just moments ago, the man in the plaid shirt and scuffed boots, sipping his coffee like he didn't have a care in the world. There was something about him that stuck with her, though. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it was the way he listened so intently, like every word she said mattered. Or maybe it was the kindness in his eyes when he left that generous tip. Whatever it was, it felt different. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 10 minutes until closing time. She sighed, knowing the night wasn't over yet. There were still tables to clean, dishes to stack, and floors to mop before she could finally call it a day. As she worked, she replayed their conversation in her head. He hadn't said much, just asked a few questions here and there, but the way he responded made her feel heard. That didn't happen often, especially not from customers. Most people came in, ordered their food, paid their bill, and left without giving the staff a second thought. But this guy, he seemed genuinely interested. "What do you think about the new owner?" he'd asked her toward the end of their chat. Emily hesitated before answering, unsure how much she should share with someone she barely knew. But then again, why not? What did she have to lose? "Honestly," she'd replied, leaning against the counter, "I don't know what they're thinking half the time. They never come around anymore, so we don't even see them. And when they do show up, it's all about numbers. How many plates we served, how fast we cleaned tables, blah, blah, blah. It's like they forgot we're actual people trying to make a living." The man nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Sounds frustrating," he said simply. "It is," Emily agreed, her voice tinged with frustration. "Before, things weren't perfect, but at least the old owners cared about us. Now it feels like we're just cogs in a machine. Like if we can't squeeze out another dollar, we're disposable." She paused, realizing she might be saying too much. "Sorry, I shouldn't complain. You probably don't want to hear all this." "On the contrary," the man said, surprising her. "Sometimes hearing the truth is exactly what people need. Keeps them grounded." His words lingered in her mind long after he left. Grounded, that was an interesting choice of phrase. It sounded like something someone important would say, someone used to making big decisions. But no, she shook her head. That was silly. He was just a traveler passing through. Nothing more. As she finished wiping down the counters, Emily noticed something odd. The man's coffee cup was still sitting where he'd left it, along with the cash he'd placed on the table. Curious, she picked up the bills and counted them under the dim light of the overhead lamp. $20 for a $5 tab. That was way more than necessary, even for someone as kind as he seemed. A smile tugged at the corners of her lips despite herself. Whoever he was, he clearly believed in tipping well. Just as she tucked the money into the register, the manager poked his head out of the office. "Hey, you almost done?" he called out, his tone clipped as always. "Yeah, just finishing up," Emily replied, forcing a polite smile. The manager rarely stuck around, past 9 o'clock, preferring to leave the cleanup to the staff while he headed home early. Tonight was no exception. He gave her a quick nod before disappearing into the back room again, leaving her alone with her thoughts. By the time she locked up and stepped outside, the air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the nearby woods. The parking lot was nearly empty now, save for her beat-up sedan parked near the edge. She fished her keys out of her pocket and unlocked the door, sliding into the driver's seat with a tired groan. Her feet ached, her back was sore, and her brain felt foggy from exhaustion. All she wanted was to go home, crawl into bed, and forget about the diner for a while. But as she drove down the dark highway, her mind kept circling back to the stranger. Something about him felt familiar, though she couldn't place it. Was it his voice, his mannerisms, or maybe it was the way he carried himself, with a quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding attention? Whatever it was, it nagged at her, refusing to let go. When she finally pulled into the driveway of her tiny apartment complex, Emily turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself it was just the stress of the job getting to her. After all, she met dozens of customers every week, most of them blended together into a blur of faces and orders. This guy shouldn't be any different. And yet, he was. Unbeknownst to Emily, miles away in a spacious office filled with framed photos and awards, the same man leaned back in his chair, scrolling through messages on his phone. His brow furrowed slightly as he read updates from the diner's management team, complaints about declining profits, requests for budget cuts, reports of low employee morale. He tapped the screen absent-mindedly, his mind drifting back to the young waitress he'd spoken with earlier. There was a fire in her words, a raw honesty that reminded him of why he got into the business in the first place. Back then, it wasn't about money or fame. It was about creating spaces where people could gather, connect, and feel valued. Somewhere along the way, he realized that mission had gotten lost. And now, listening to her vent about tips and owners who didn't care, it hit him. The problem wasn't just the diner, it was him. The next morning, Emily woke up groggy and still half asleep, the events of the previous night lingering in her mind like a distant dream. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about the stranger at the diner, the way he listened, the kindness in his eyes, the surprisingly large tip he left behind. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie where life takes an unexpected turn. But as she dragged herself out of bed, pulled on her uniform and headed to work, she pushed those thoughts aside. It was just another day, she told herself. Another shift at the diner. Nothing special. When she walked through the front door, though, the atmosphere was anything but normal. The usual hum of chatter among the staff was replaced by nervous energy. People huddled in small groups, whispering urgently. Plates clattered louder than usual in the kitchen, and even the cook seemed distracted, glancing toward the office every few minutes. Something was up. "Hey," Emily said cautiously as she approached one of her co-workers, a middle-aged man who had worked at the diner longer than anyone else. "What's going on? Why does everyone look so tense?" The man glanced around before leaning in closer, lowering his voice. "Word is the owner's coming in today." Emily blinked. "The owner? You mean the new guy? That's never happened before. Why now?" "No clue," he replied, shrugging. "But rumor has it they're making some kind of announcement. Maybe cutting costs again, or worse, laying people off." He shook his head grimly. "Either way, it's not going to be good news for us." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Layoffs? Budget cuts? Those were the last things they needed right now. Morale was already low, and if the rumors were true, it would only get worse. She tried to focus on setting up her station, refilling, ketchup bottles, stacking napkins, wiping down tables, but her hands moved mechanically, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. By mid-morning, the tension in the air was palpable. The manager emerged from his office looking unusually flustered and gathered everyone into the dining area. "Listen up," he called out, his voice sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. "The owner will be arriving shortly. I expect everyone to be on their best behavior. No slacking off, no complaining, and absolutely no drama. Understood?" There was a chorus of reluctant nods, but the unease remained. Owners rarely visited the diner, and when they did, it usually meant trouble. Emily exchanged worried glances with her co-workers as they scattered back to their stations, trying to act busy while secretly dreading what was about to happen. An hour passed, then 2. Just as the lunch rush began to pick up, the bell above, the entrance jingled softly, signaling someone's arrival. Everyone froze, turning instinctively toward the door. And there he was, the same man in the plaid shirt and scuffed boots from the night before. For a split second, Emily didn't recognize him. Her brain struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet stranger sipping coffee with the reality of the diner's elusive owner walking through the door. Then it clicked. The calm demeanor, the confident posture, the subtle authority in the way he carried himself, it all made sense now. Her heart sank. Oh no. She remembered everything she'd said to him the night before. The complaints about tips, the grumbling about management, the frustration over feeling like a cog in a machine. She'd spilled her guts to the one person who could actually do something about it. And now she was certain she'd just ruined her chances of keeping her job. The owner stood near the entrance for a moment, surveying the room with a steady gaze. His presence was magnetic. Even the customers paused mid-bite to glance his way. After a beat, he stepped forward, nodding politely at the manager before addressing the staff. "Thank you all for taking a moment," he began, his voice warm but firm. "I know you're busy, so I'll keep this brief. First, let me say how much I appreciate the hard work each of you puts into this place every single day. Running a diner isn't easy, and yet you show up day after day to make sure our customers leave happy. That takes dedication, and I don't think you hear that enough." A murmur rippled through the crowd, surprise evident on nearly every face. This wasn't the cold, distant figure they'd imagined. If anything, he sounded human. He continued, pacing slowly as he spoke. "Lately, I've heard some concerns from both customers and employees about how things are running here. Some of you may feel disconnected from the decisions being made, or maybe you've noticed changes that haven't sat well with you. Let me assure you, I'm listening. And starting today, we're going to make some adjustments." Emily's pulse quickened. Adjustments? What kind of adjustments? She couldn't bring herself to look directly at him, instead focusing on the floor as if willing herself to disappear. "For starters," he went on, "we're implementing a new tipping system designed to ensure fairness across the board. No more uneven distribution or confusion about who gets what. Your efforts will be recognized properly moving forward." A cheer erupted from the staff, breaking the tension that had gripped the room moments earlier. The owner raised a hand to quiet them, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Second," he added, "we're increasing wages across the board. Not by much, but enough to reflect the value of your contributions. Additionally, we'll be introducing benefits, healthcare options, paid time off, that I hope will make your lives a little easier." The room erupted again, louder this time. People exchanged stunned looks, some laughing in disbelief, others wiping away tears. For years they'd accepted the bare minimum, assuming nothing would change. Now suddenly it felt like the world had shifted. Finally, the owner turned his attention to Emily. Her breath hitched as she realized he was looking straight at her, his expression unreadable. Was he angry? Disappointed? Ready to fire her on the spot? Instead, he smiled, a genuine, disarming smile that put her at ease despite herself. "I also want to take a moment to thank someone in particular," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the din. "Last night I had the pleasure of meeting one of our waitstaff during my visit. She shared some honest feedback about her experiences here, and while I won't repeat everything she said, I will say this. Her honesty reminded me of why I started this business in the first place, to create a place where people matter, not just the customers but the team that makes it all possible." Emily's cheeks flushed red as murmurs broke out among her co-workers. They craned their necks to see who he was talking about, and when their eyes landed on her, she wanted nothing more than to crawl under the nearest table. "She didn't know who I was when she spoke to me," he continued, his tone light but sincere, and that's exactly why her words meant so much. Sometimes the truth only comes when no one thinks you're listening. The room erupted once more, this time with cheers and applause directed squarely at Emily. She stood frozen, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or run away. Instead, she managed a weak wave, her face burning with embarrassment and gratitude. As the owner wrapped up his speech and mingled with the staff, shaking hands and thanking them personally, Emily found herself face to face with him. Up close, he looked even more imposing than she remembered, yet his presence was oddly comforting. "About last night," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Don't apologize," said firmly. "You were right about everything. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're going to fix it, together." With that, he gave her shoulder a reassuring pat and moved on to speak with someone else. Emily exhaled deeply, the weight lifting off her chest. Against all odds, her candid conversation with a stranger had sparked real change, not just for her, but for everyone at the diner. The days that followed the owner's surprise visit felt like a whirlwind. At first, Emily wasn't sure what to make of it all. The changes he announced seemed almost too good to be true. Better wages, improved benefits, and a fair tipping system? It sounded like something out of a dream. But as the weeks rolled on, she realized this wasn't just talk. Things were actually happening. One of the first noticeable shifts came with the new tipping structure. Gone were the days when waitstaff had to scramble over uneven splits or argue about who got credit for what. Now, tips were pooled and distributed, evenly based on hours worked. It might not have been perfect, it never is, but it was a huge improvement. For the first time in ages, Emily didn't dread looking at her paycheck at the end of the week. She could finally breathe a little easier, knowing she wouldn't have to stretch every dollar until it snapped. But it wasn't just the money that made the difference. Something deeper had shifted in the diner's atmosphere. Morale skyrocketed, almost overnight. People who used to drag themselves through their shifts now showed up early, ready to work. Conversations between staff members grew lighter, filled with laughter instead of complaints. Even the customers noticed. Regulars commented on how much friendlier everyone seemed, how the service felt warmer and more personal. Word spread quickly, and soon the diner was busier than it had been in years. Emily found herself taking on more responsibility without even realizing it. Her coworkers looked to her for guidance, especially after the owner singled her out during his announcement. At first, she felt uncomfortable being thrust into the spotlight. She wasn't used to being seen as a leader. She was just someone trying to get by. But the more she stepped up, the more natural it felt. Whether it was helping train a new hire, mediating a disagreement between servers, or brainstorming ways to improve efficiency during peak hours, she threw herself into the role wholeheartedly. And the best part? The owner noticed. He started making regular appearances at the diner, not just once every blue moon, but weekly, sometimes even daily. He'd walk in wearing his signature plaid shirt and boots, blending in so seamlessly that customers often mistook him for just another local. Sometimes he'd sit at a table sipping coffee and observing quietly. Other times he'd roll up his sleeves and jump behind the counter, serving plates alongside the staff. It was surreal to see someone with his reputation working side by side with them, but it also sent a powerful message. We're all in this together. During one particularly chaotic Saturday morning rush, Emily spotted him filling salt shakers at an empty booth. She approached cautiously, unsure whether to address him formally or casually. "Need a hand?" she asked, nodding toward the pile of condiments. He glanced up, flashing that same warm smile she'd come to recognize. "Nah, I'm good," he replied. "Besides, you've got enough on your plate already." She chuckled, leaning against the edge of the booth. "You know, people still can't believe you're here. Half the town thinks it's some kind of prank." "Let 'em think what they want," he said with a shrug. "I'm just glad to be back where it matters." His words stuck with her long after the conversation ended. There was something deeply humbling about watching a man of his stature prioritize human connection over prestige. It reminded her why she loved working in the service industry in the first place. Not because of the glamour or the pay, but because of the people. Every customer had a story, every coworker brought something unique to the table, and every day presented a chance to make someone's life just a little bit brighter. As the months passed, the diner transformed into more than just a place to grab a meal. It became a hub for the community, a space where people gathered to share laughter, tears, and everything in between. Families celebrated birthdays, friends reunited after years apart, strangers struck up conversations that turned into lifelong friendships. And through it all, Emily found herself growing, not just professionally, but personally. Her confidence soared. Tasks that once intimidated her, Handling difficult customers, managing schedules, making tough decisions, now felt manageable. She started dreaming bigger, imagining possibilities beyond the diner walls. Maybe someday she'd open her own restaurant, or maybe she'd stay right where she was, building on the foundation they'd created together. Either way, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Meanwhile, the owner continued to check in regularly, always asking for feedback and ideas. He treated everyone with the same level of respect regardless of their position. Cooks, dishwashers, cashiers. It didn't matter. If you worked there, your opinion mattered. That simple philosophy fostered a sense of unity among the staff that hadn't existed before. They weren't just co-workers anymore. They were a team. One evening, after a particularly busy dinner shift, Emily found herself alone with the owner as they closed up for the night. The rest of the staff had already headed home, leaving the two of them to finish tidying up. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, unsure how to phrase what she wanted to say. "You really changed things around here," she began, stacking chairs onto tables as she spoke. I don't think anyone expected, well, any of this." He paused, turning to face her. "What did you expect?" She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "Honestly, nothing. Most owners wouldn't care enough to listen, let alone act. You could have just ignored me that night. I wouldn't have blamed you." He let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. "Ignoring you would have been the easy thing to do. But easy doesn't always mean right." His response caught her off guard. She stopped what she was doing, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Why did you listen?" she asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Because," he said simply, "sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places. You taught me that." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, though. It was comfortable, like the kind you share with someone who truly understands you. Finally, Emily broke the quiet with a grin. "Well, I guess I'll never complain to a stranger again, just in case." They both laughed, the sound echoing softly through the empty diner. As they locked up and parted ways for the night, Emily couldn't help but feel grateful for the job, for the people, and for the twist of fate that brought a quiet stranger into her life. Little did she know, the story was far from over. Word travels fast in a small town, faster still when the story is juicy enough to grab attention. It wasn't long before whispers about what had happened at the diner began making their way around the community. At first, it was just idle chatter, waitstaff swapping stories during breaks, customers casually mentioning how much friendlier the place felt lately. But then someone posted about it online. A local blogger heard the tale and decided to write it up. Before anyone knew it, the story of the waitress who complained to her boss without realizing he was her boss had gone viral. It started with a simple headline: "Waitress complained about tips to a stranger, not knowing he was Chuck Norris, the owner." The article painted a vivid picture of Emily's late-night rant, the owner's unexpected visit, and the sweeping changes that followed. Details were sparse but compelling enough to spark curiosity. Readers latched onto the narrative, sharing it across social media platforms like wildfire. Comments poured in from all over the country, some praising the owner's humility, others marveling at Emily's boldness, and many simply enjoying the feel-good nature of the story. Back at the diner, life carried on as usual, at least for a little while. Emily and her co-workers were too busy keeping up with the sudden influx of customers to pay much attention to the growing buzz. Business had picked up significantly since the changes were implemented, and weekends were now packed. With families, tourists, and locals alike, people came not just for the food but for the experience, a glimpse into the little diner that could, as one commenter affectionately called it. But then the reporters showed up. The first sign something was different came on a Tuesday morning. A news van pulled into the parking lot, its satellite dish gleaming under the Texas sun. Emily was wiping down tables near the window when she spotted it. Her stomach dropped. She nudged a coworker beside her. Is that?" "Looks like it," the coworker replied, equally stunned. Within minutes, a crew entered the diner, cameras rolling and microphones at the ready. They approached the manager, who looked as bewildered as everyone else. After a brief exchange, he gestured toward Emily, who immediately froze. Oh no, this couldn't be happening. One of the reporters stepped forward, extending a hand. Hi there. We're here to talk about the incredible turnaround at this diner, and your role in it. Emily blinked, caught off guard. My role? The reporter nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. You're the one who spoke honestly to the owner without knowing who he was. That kind of courage deserves recognition. Courage? Is that what they thought it was? Emily half laughed, half groaned. If only they knew how panicked she'd been afterward, convinced she'd lose her job. Still, she forced a polite smile and agreed to answer a few questions. What else could she do? The interview was short but sweet. Emily recounted the night she vented to the stranger at the counter, her voice tinged with both amusement and disbelief. She talked about how shocked she'd been when she realized who he was, and how grateful she felt for the positive changes that followed. When asked if she regretted speaking her mind, she shook her head firmly. Not for a second, she said. If anything, I'm glad I did. Sometimes you've got to say what's on your mind, even if you don't think anyone's listening. Her words struck a chord with viewers. Clips of the interview aired on local news stations, then regional ones, and eventually national outlets. Social media exploded with reactions. Memes popped up featuring the owner's iconic stoic expression alongside captions like, "When you accidentally roast your boss." Fans praised his calm demeanor and willingness to listen, calling him a real-life superhero, not just because of his action movie fame, but because of his humanity. For Emily, the attention was overwhelming but oddly heartwarming. Messages flooded in from strangers thanking her for being brave enough to speak up. Some shared similar experiences, recounting times they'd voiced concerns only to face backlash or indifference. Others expressed admiration for her honesty, saying it inspired them to stand up for themselves in their own lives. One message stood out among the rest. You reminded us that change starts with telling the truth, even when it's hard. Meanwhile, the diner became a tourist attraction of sorts. Cars lined the parking lot daily, many bearing license plates from neighboring states. Customers snapped photos of the neon sign outside, posed by the counter where Emily worked, and even requested autographs from the owner whenever he stopped by. Servers joked that they should start charging admission fees just to keep up with demand. Through it all, Emily remained grounded. Sure, the spotlight was flattering, but she didn't let it go to her head. Instead, she focused on what mattered most, taking care of her customers and supporting her team. She worked closely with the owner to ensure the changes stuck, offering suggestions based on first-hand experience. Together, they fine-tuned processes, streamlined communication between shifts, and found creative ways to reward staff for their hard work. It wasn't always easy, change never is, but the effort paid off tenfold. As the weeks turned into months, the frenzy died down slightly. Reporters moved on to other stories, and the constant stream of tourists tapered off. Life at the diner settled into a new rhythm, one that balanced growth with authenticity. Emily continued to thrive in her role, earning promotions and gaining confidence with each passing day. Her relationship with the owner evolved into a mentorship of sorts. He trusted her judgment, sought her input, and encouraged her to dream bigger than she ever had before. One evening after closing time, Emily sat alone at a booth, flipping through a notebook filled with ideas for the future. The diner had come so far in such a short time, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to do. More improvements to make, more lives to touch, more stories to tell. The bell above the door jingled softly, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced up, surprised to see the owner walking in. He slid into the seat across from her, setting a steaming cup of coffee on the table. "What are you working on?" he asked, nodding toward the notebook. She hesitated, then pushed it toward him. "Just some ideas," she admitted. "Ways we can keep building on what we've started." He flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing slightly as he read. Finally, he looked up, his expression thoughtful. "These are good," he said. "Really good." Have you thought about presenting them to the team? I'm not sure, she replied, shrugging. I mean, I don't want to overstep or anything. You won't, he assured her. In fact, I think it's exactly what we need. Don't underestimate yourself. You've already proven you have what it takes to lead. His words hit her like a punch to the gut, but in the best possible way. For so long, she'd seen herself as just another cog in the machine, someone trying to survive paycheck to paycheck. Now, sitting across from the man who had unknowingly changed her life forever, she realized she was capable of so much more. As they talked late into the night, mapping out plans and brainstorming solutions, Emily felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known was missing. The diner wasn't just a job anymore, it was a mission, and she was ready to take it to the next level. By the time winter rolled around, the diner had become more than just a roadside stop. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of honesty. People didn't just come for the food anymore, they came to be part of something bigger. The story of how one waitress's late-night venting led to real change resonated deeply with folks from all walks of life. It reminded them that even in an age of big corporations and faceless decision-makers, there were still people willing to listen and act. The owner, too, became a legend in his own right, not because of his fame or fortune, but because of what he represented: humility, integrity, and leadership by example. He wasn't just the guy who owned the diner. He was the guy who served pancakes on busy mornings, helped clean up after closing time, and took the time to remember every employee's birthday. His presence made the place feel less like a business and more like a family gathering spot. And Emily? Well, she'd grown into her role as the heart of it all. One chilly December evening, as snowflakes began to dust the ground outside, the diner buzzed with its usual energy. Inside, warm light spilled from overhead lamps, casting a golden glow over booths filled with laughter and chatter. Families huddled together over steaming plates of comfort food, while travelers sipped hot chocolate at the counter, grateful for a break from the cold. Emily moved between tables with practiced ease, her smile wide and genuine despite the chaos. She'd come a long way since those early days of frustration and self-doubt. Now, she thrived under pressure, leading her team with quiet confidence and unwavering determination. At one corner, table sat a group of tourists snapping photos of their meals before digging in. One of them, a middle-aged woman wearing a bright red scarf, called Emily over. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her phone. "Are you the waitress from the story?" Emily chuckled softly, nodding. "Guilty as charged." "Oh my goodness," the woman exclaimed, clearly starstruck. "We've been following your story online for months. My husband and I planned this whole road trip just so we could visit the diner." Her husband nodded enthusiastically. "It's amazing what you did. Most people wouldn't have the guts to speak up like that." Emily blushed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Honestly, I didn't think anyone was listening," she admitted. "I'm just glad it turned out okay." The couple thanked her profusely, insisting on taking a picture with her before she returned to work. As she walked away, she couldn't help but shake her head in disbelief. Who would have thought her life would end up like this? Later that night, after the last customer left and the staff finished cleaning up, the owner pulled Emily aside. "Got a minute?" he asked, gesturing toward the office. "Sure," she replied, following him inside. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, its walls lined with framed photos and awards. In the center stood a desk cluttered with papers and receipts, though surprisingly neat compared to how it used to look. He motioned for her to sit down, then leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his stomach. "So," he began, his tone casual but deliberate. "How do you feel about everything that's happened?" Emily hesitated, unsure where he was going with this. "It's a lot," she admitted finally. "Sometimes it feels surreal, like none of it is real. But mostly, I'm just thankful. For the changes, for the support, for, well, everything." He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Good, because I need someone I can trust to help carry this forward." Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, he continued, leaning forward slightly, that I'm stepping back a bit. Not completely, I'll still be around, but I want someone else to take the lead here. Someone who knows this place inside and out, who understands what makes it special. He paused, looking directly at her. And I think that person is you. Emily stared at him, stunned. Her mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. Led the diner? Her? I don't know what to say, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to decide right now, he assured her. But think about it. You've already proven you have what it takes. All you need is a little faith in yourself. Overwhelmed but intrigued, Emily agreed to consider it. Over the next few weeks, they worked closely together, discussing plans, strategies, and goals for the future. Slowly but surely, she began to see herself not just as a waitress or a supervisor, but as someone capable of shaping the legacy of the diner. With the owner's guidance, she learned the ins and outs of management, marketing, and community outreach. Every step of the way, he reminded her of one simple truth. Success isn't measured by profits, but by the impact you leave on others. As spring approached, Emily officially took over as manager of the diner. The transition was seamless, thanks to the strong foundation laid by the owner and the unwavering support of her team. Under her leadership, the diner continued to thrive, becoming a beacon of positivity and progress in the community. They hosted charity events, partnered with local schools, and even started a mentorship program for young people interested in the hospitality industry. Customers kept coming, not just for the food, but for the sense of belonging the diner provided. Strangers became friends, and friends became family. Emily often found herself pausing during busy shifts to soak it all in. The laughter, the stories, the connections forged over cups of coffee and slices of pie. It was messy, chaotic, and exhausting, but it was also beautiful. One afternoon, as she stood near the counter watching the lunch crowd filter out, the owner approached her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes twinkling with pride. You've done good, he said simply. Better than I ever could have hoped. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, forcing a smile. I couldn't have done it without you, she replied. None of this would have been possible, he shrugged modestly. Maybe. But sometimes all it takes is giving people a chance to shine. And shine she did. From the moment she complained to a stranger at the counter to the day she stepped into her new role as manager, Emily proved that honesty, hard work, and a little bit of courage can change the world, or at least one small corner of it. The diner remained a testament to that belief, welcoming everyone who walked through its doors with open arms and a promise. No matter where you come from or what you've been through, you belong here. Outside, the neon sign flickered softly in the twilight, casting its familiar glow over the parking lot. Inside, the warmth of shared stories and second chances filled the air. Life went on, as it always does, but for Emily and everyone touched by the diner's journey, nothing would ever be quite the same again.